In the 1990s, a single, unremarkable change to veterinary medicine in South Asia triggered one of the fastest wildlife population collapses ever documented for any bird species, and the consequences that followed weren't just ecological. Researchers eventually connected that collapse to a measurable rise in human disease and death across the region. The animal at the center of this story wasn't a predator at all. It was the vulture. And what happened when it nearly disappeared reveals just how much invisible work this unglamorous bird was actually doing. Vultures are obligate scavengers, meaning they survive almost entirely on carrion, animals that are already dead, rather than hunting live prey. That role sounds unimpressive compared to a lion or an eagle, but it depends on a genuinely extraordinary piece of biology most people never think about. A vulture's stomach acid is powerful enough to neutralize pathogens that would be lethal to almost any other animal, including the bacteria responsible for anthrax, botulism, and cholera, along with viruses like rabies, allowing vultures to feed safely on carcasses that would otherwise become a serious source of disease transmission if left to decompose naturally or scavenged by less specialized animals. A single vulture flock can strip a large carcass down to bone in under an hour, removing a potential disease source from the environment almost as quickly as it appears. For most of history, that speed and efficiency simply happened in the background, unnoticed, taken entirely for granted. In the 1990s, that background process started breaking down, and researchers eventually traced the cause to a specific, common veterinary drug. Diclofenac, a cheap anti-inflammatory medication widely given to sick or injured livestock across India and neighboring countries, turned out to be fatally toxic to vultures that fed on the carcasses of treated animals, causing kidney failure even at extremely low residual doses. Because diclofenac use was so widespread across the region's livestock, and because vultures scavenge across huge distances, the toxic effect spread through vulture populations with devastating speed. Here's where the scale of what happened next becomes almost impossible to overstate, because this wasn't a gradual decline, it was closer to a collapse. Populations of several vulture species across India crashed by more than 99% in under a decade, among the fastest and most severe wildlife population declines ever recorded for any bird anywhere in the world. Species that had once been common enough to go largely unnoticed became critically endangered in the span of roughly 10 years, a timeline so short that researchers studying the crash described it as unprecedented for a large, wide-ranging bird species. The consequences that followed weren't limited to the birds themselves. With vultures gone, carcasses across the region began accumulating and decomposing far more slowly, and feral dog populations expanded significantly to partially fill the scavenging gap left behind, since dogs will eat carrion, but do so far less efficiently and far more slowly than a vulture flock ever did. That shift mattered enormously because feral dogs are a far more effective vector for disease transmission to humans than vultures ever were, particularly rabies. Published research examining the years following the vulture collapse found a measurable increase in feral dog populations and associated rabies risk across affected regions, with researchers estimating a genuinely significant public health and economic cost tied directly back to the disappearance of a bird most people had never considered important at all. There's a cultural dimension to this collapse worth mentioning too. Communities practicing traditional sky burial, including the Parsi Zoroastrian community centered around Mumbai's Tower of Silence, have relied on vultures as part of that practice for generations. And the population crash forced difficult, still ongoing adaptations to religious traditions that had depended on a reliably abundant vulture population existing nearby. The response, once researchers identified the cause, did produce a genuine conservation success story worth including here. Diclofenac was banned for veterinary use across India, Nepal, and Pakistan starting in 2006, and captive breeding and release programs have since worked to slow the decline and begin rebuilding vulture populations in affected regions. Though full recovery from a population collapse, this severe but remains a slow, ongoing process even now. So the next time you see a vulture circling overhead, resist the urge to think of it as simply waiting for something to die. It's running a disease control system most of the natural world depends on, constantly, quietly, and almost entirely without credit. And for one region of the world, the consequences of losing that system briefly, measurably, cost human lives. Did you know vultures were doing this much invisible work before watching this? Or is this the first time you're hearing it? Tell me honestly in the comments. And subscribe to NatureCrest for more deep dives into the animal kingdom's most underappreciated and most misunderstood creatures.